Hello again and welcome to the fifth video in the assembly series for the Halloween Skulls animatronic skull. In this one we're going to connect up the eyes that go in the front of the skull. For this we're going to need several things. We're going to need a skull front. We're going to need the eye pieces. You already made these eye shafts in one of the earlier ones, I believe the second video. We're going to need the three main components of the two-axis eye movements, and we're going to need a couple of springs, which I have right here. This is in your parts list. 1, 2. You're going to need the two servos. These are the HS82MG, and I have also put the gears on these. These are the same gears that we use in the rear section and the three-axis movement. They're the 24-tooth gears, and to save a little bit of time I've already put them on the HS82MG, so they're already installed. Lastly, I'm going to need a set of eyeballs, and this is in your parts list. You will have gotten this online. There's a place on eBay that sells them. There are many places that sell them. They have to be 24mm eyeballs with a shaft out of the back, and these pieces here are made to specifically fit into this size eyeball. So if you want to experiment and get your own eyeballs from a different vendor, make sure you're going to have to test them and make sure that that this LED part fits inside the back of them, and it's got to fit fairly snug. Okay, so those are the pieces we're going to need to complete this portion, and from here we'll get started. So our first thing is to install the eye left and right servo, and that would be plugged in a servo board to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th position. So that is this servo right here, and that is going to control the left and right movement of the eyeballs. This may not seem intuitive at the moment, but it will all get cleared up in short time. So this is the piece with these two tabs at the top that screw into the front of the skull and brings the entire eye mechanism with it, including the controller board. This is where the controller board gets mounted. So there's going to be a little bit of finagling of wires in here. I don't know if you can see in here. Let's put this in the light. Right here, this little tray section here is where the wires drop in through the slot and then get pushed over to one side or the other so that they don't interfere with the movement of the eyes. That keeps them down. And then they come out the back side and come up behind the mechanism and to the controller board. So we'll work on that a little bit later on. Right now we're going to take this as our first step. This is actually the board that is the furthest into the skull once it's screwed in. And everything else builds on top of that, moving towards the back of the skull. So we take the servo that we talked about, the one in the 5th position, HS82MG, and you'll notice on the back of this board it has a cutout that is exactly the size of an HS82MG. If you try to put another servo in there, even the 85MG, it will not fit. And this drops right into the cutout. The wire falls right into this slot here. No screws to hold it in at this point, and you'll see that the servo gear sticks out over the top here, and that is what's going to mesh with the teeth on this centerpiece. When we put that in, you'll see that it moves with the gear. You could hear the gear just moving right there. Okay, that is the first thing we're going to mount, but before we mount anything, we're going to have to assemble this and put it in the lockdown position, and that is what is going to center everything, just like we did in the back ones. We have a special alignment hole, and all of these, if If you look at it for a minute, there's only one way that these three things can fit together because of all the different patterns. So you can't do it wrong. It won't go the wrong way around. Now I'm using just an Allen wrench here because this is much deeper than the other one. We may have a screw that fits it. It's still sized for a 440 screw, but this will fit in it fine. And so I'm going to push that through the first hole, the second hole, and we're going to find the third hole, and there you go. Now you see that fits right through all three pieces and they cannot move. You want to be careful with this section. This is a very important hinged piece. It's hinged here, and that has to move smoothly, and it's hinged on each end as well, and those need to move smoothly, and it's kind of fragile there. You don't want to bend this the wrong way or put too much pressure on it in any way, because you'll snap those off and then you're not going to get your eye motion. Those are a very critical part right there. Okay, now we're ready to insert the first servo. First servo is going to be the servo on the back. When we put this servo on, we use these plates that screw onto the back and hold the servo tight in its position. This part that goes in the back is also designed to hold our controller card, which will stay there, and actually that means that it's located right between the eyes and the forehead, way up in the back of the very front of the skull, but you won't. It's right up in here. You're not going to see it from the outside. So that goes right between the eyes and up on the top and gets packed in out of the way. All the wires run through the channel in here and then go out down through the bottom here. There is something I haven't done here yet, which we'll get to in the last step, and that's put the neck piece on, which hides all the wires. All right, so we've got these aligned. I'm going to back this off a little bit. I'm going to leave it in the piece, but I'm just not going to let it stick out because I'm going to have to put this card on. All right, so we're going to put that servo into place and let the wire go right in that slot here. And there it is. Fits just like it was made for it, because of course it was. Now I'm going to place this piece on here, and you'll notice that it lines up with the 4 holes in the piece below it, and the slot here lines up with the gear, but it still sticks up a little bit past here. Right now this gear is attached to the middle piece. I can't move it because this piece is in there, but if I were to move this gear, it would slide side to side. Now, before we screw this down, we have to center this servo. We do that with our VSA program, and basically we just start the program, and it centers the servo and holds its position. While it's doing that, we set it in place. Okay, now it's meshed with the gears and it's in the exact center of the servo. Now we don't touch it again until we put the screws in, and then that will always stay in that position. Now we can't quite put the screws in until we mount the board. So this board is going to mount a little tricky with all the different parts moving around here. You'll see these little risers on this board that holds the servo in place. They go up, and their purpose is to keep the board, is to raise the board up just enough that it clears this gear and it doesn't scrape along the bottom of the board. And that's what we're going to do right now. We just got to weave our wiring into this so that it makes sense. And so we're going to put our screws in there. We'll be using the 1/2 inch screws, the 1/2 inch number 6 screws here. We've got 4 of them. We'll need a Phillips head screwdriver. Right down. And our 4th screw. Okay, now we've got the board mounted, we've got the servo in place. Okay, now I'm going to take the other side. And this is still locked. So this is our up and down, eyes up and down servo. It's the remaining HS82MG, and it only goes in one way. You're going to place that in there. We're just going to make sure that this is, alright, this is no longer holding its position, so I'm just going to restart this project right here. Okay. Now the servo's in center position. We drop it in. This is still locked in place. And we're going to put this last plate right on here. And you notice there's a shaved edge over here, and that just lines up along with the shaved edge on the piece below it. So that's easy. And we got more of these 1/2-inch screws. We're going to put those in place. Tighten them right down. There we go. And the last screw. Okay. Now, very important, before any servo gets any commands to move anywhere, you got to remove your alignment tool, because both servos are now locked in their center positions and engaged with the teeth on these gears. And if you leave the alignment tool in there and these parts can't move when the servos move them, those gears will strip. So that will be a problem. Now I'm going to make sure that we are clear to go. Okay, so I'll hold this as though it were screwed into the skull, and I'll start the routine, which just basically goes back and forth, side to side, and then up and down. And this is how this will work. That's it. Now we're going to put it in the skull. Now I'm going to take a couple of 1/2-inch screws. And we're going to put one right in there. And that's going in now. Okay, now we have both of those screws on the top, right there and there, and this piece is firmly in place. Now once again, this wire can stay up here. The two wires that go to the servos that are at the top piece just stay where they are. These wires and the power wires and the DMX wire all get fit in this trough here. That's where all these wires are going to go. So we got our positive and negative power wire to the controller board. We've got our Dmx cable to the controller board that could just poke right off to the side here. Then we're going to have all the servo wires for the back of the skull, and I'll put those in just a minute. But first, before we attach the two pieces of skull and get them in the right configuration, we got to put the eyes in. And so here's the thing about the eyes. They load from the front of the skull. So we're going to take the eyeball, put it in here. And you can see that rolls right around nice and easy. Now from the back, you'll see that piece. Let's move that around for you. You'll see this, there's a shaft right here. And that, you can see that moving around. So we want to line that up with the part, with this sleeve here. We're going to align that. And we still have our two springs, so we're going to take one of the eyeballs, doesn't matter which one, or one of the eye shafts, we call these. They have the LED right at the top, right there. We're going to slide a spring over the top. Okay, now we're going to take that shaft, slide it through this sleeve, and then right into the eyeball in the back. And we're going to push it in. You have to be careful. You're going to push it in so it's pretty tight, but it is possible to split the end of that eyeball if you push them too hard. As with everything in this thing, there's tolerance levels where you can't exceed too much pressure anywhere. Now that should fit nice and tight, and it should hold it into place just by the tension of that piece sliding in. And that's all that does hold the eyeballs into place. It's just a tight connection. Now we're going to take the second eyeball. You can see how that one looks. I'm going to take the second eyeball. I'm going to hold that in place right under this side. We're going to take the other spring. What these springs do is they keep the eyeball seated firmly in the eye socket from viewing it from the front of the skull by keeping tension on them back here, so when you turn it at an angle they don't look like they're popping out of the skull. Alright. Now again we align all of that, and then I just kind of turn and push this one into this eyeball till it's tight, but not enough to crack the eyeball. Now there they stay. Here's what the front looks like. You got your eyes looking straight forward, and in the back everything looks straight. Now I can run that little program again on VSA, and let's see what that looks like. There we go. At this point we're ready to put the two halves together. So we're going to bring this in as best as I can show you. The rest of these servo wires are going to get fed through that trough at the bottom, right on the other side. And hopefully they'll stay in place there and stay out of the way of everything else. We'll get that one in, that one in. Now an easy thing to do, once you get those wires in that trough, and it's hard to show it here, they're all kind of in place there. And I'm going to grab myself one of these little plugs here. You can see the notches in the side of it that's designed to slide right across the top of that trough where that opening is. It fits right in those two notches, slides right in, and holds the wires, blocking them from being able to come out unless you remove it manually, which you can do. It's tight, but it just slides in and out. And that's what it looks like in place. Now we can take the two halves of the skull and put them together. Now on the back side, you want to get your wires, any wire you can just tuck into an empty corner here would be fine. And a good place to stow these wires are off to the side here on the bottom section of the skull. Okay. Now we can put the skull together. There it is. And we'll use the long screws from the back. And now we're going to demonstrate what it looks like when we run the eyes with the program. So here we go. There you go. Now the last thing to do is to test the LEDs in the eyes. Now I've already tested these so I know that they work, but we haven't seen what they look like inside the set of eyes. So that's all done in the VSA control. You're going to have 3 channels for eye color and 1 channel for what's called eye strobe, which is by default set to solid on. And unless you want to add a strobe light effect in the eyeballs, you just leave that one alone. That would be the 4th channel. However, our red, green, and blue, you can just create an event and set it for whatever color you want. And in this case, we'll throw some red in there. And let's turn the light away so you can see the color in the eyes. There we go. And we'll add to it over here a little bit of blue, and that'll make the eyes go a little purple. So I'll add about the same amount of blue to it. You can see there's a blue color. Okay, and then a little further on, I'm going to add some green to it. There you see some green, and that combined with the blue and the red should make them white. Then I'm going to take one color away at a time. So I'm going to take away the red, and then I'll take away the blue. And now we'll run that, and we'll see what the eyes look like while they're changing colors. Okay, we'll start it all over again. This is just eye motion right now. And we'll see how that works. Here you go. We'll just play it. Of course, this is nothing you're going to do with the skull itself. This is all in the VSA controller, and we can get some tutorials on that on the website. Here it goes. Turning red, changing to purple by adding some blue. Now I've added green, and they're white. I've taken away the red. Now it's aqua. And now I've taken away the blue and it's green, and it fades away. And that's what they'll look like. Alright, we're going to stop here for this tutorial, and then the next one will be the last one, and it'll show putting the neck piece in and getting all your wires set. But pretty much it's ready to go right now. We've already seen the 3 axes part work. We have the jaw motion, which we can set right here, so you can see that the jaw can open to whatever point you want it to, and then close again, and that's already in the program. So that's about everything. You've got your completed skull, you've got all the motion, your 3-axis motion, the eye lights, the jaw motion. It's all set, ready to go. The only thing you need now is to well, mount it on your skeleton, but while you're doing that, you're going to want to put the neck piece on. The neck piece on is just a piece of vertebrae. Fits around the post at the bottom, and you can see that there's a nice good size hole in the middle of that. There it is. And that hole is large enough to pass everything that needs to go through it. So I have disconnected the power wires from the power supply. First I want to put through the Dmx cable. And this Dmx cable, of course, has a pretty thick plug on it, but you will find that this plug will fit right through. So now you pull that up. You'll see there's 2 sides to this. There's a fairly flat side, and then there's a part with the spinal ridges. So the spinal ridges, of course, face the back. It's very thin, the very front part, on purpose, so that when he leans down and opens the jaw, it doesn't hit the neck bone. Now we can pass the other 2 wires through. So here goes your red wire, just feed it through, pull it out the other side. And your black wire. I'm going to pull that through from the other side. Okay, now that's all the only cables you have. If you have a second skull, and this is a pair, you're going to have one of them with another Dmx cable, a second Dmx cable that goes through, and those 2, that one feeds to the next skull. That's your output. In this case, this is the end of the line, so we only have one DMX cable, and that is the input for this skull. So I'm going to plug all these things back in. You probably won't be hooking this up before you place it on the skeleton, but I'm just doing that now to get the wires out of my way, and that'll probably be the last thing that you do is hook it back up to power. In a real world, that'll be the last thing that you do is hook it back up to power. Okay, so that's hooked up. This slides freely up here. Now, what we said at the beginning was that this shaft here was representing the shaft that goes up the spinal cord of a bucky skeleton. It goes all the way up, it sticks up, actually, if you buy a bucky skeleton, that shaft goes all the way up through the head, and there's a little hook on the very top, which they hang the skeleton from. Since we are discarding the bucky skull, we're going to have this post that's way too long. So when you modify your bucky skeleton to place this on top of it, you're going to want to cut that metal shaft at a height that looks about right with this. Now, in front of or around that metal shaft is the vertebrae that comes with a bucky skeleton. You want to save those pieces. You'll cut the shaft short, and you'll save several pieces. There's this much vertebrae that we're taking off of the bucky skeleton. So we're going to disconnect this from what would be the bucky skeleton by just loosening the set screw that's right there, and then it'll come right off. Now we're going to take these wires, hopefully towards the back there. We'll slide this whole thing in, turn it around so it's facing the right way, and then we would place this back on the skeleton. And then what you would do is this part here, this vertebrae would meet up with the last piece of vertebrae that you left on the bucky skeleton, and that's what's going to hold it in place. Right here it's just kind of loose and could fall down, but once you put it on the skeleton, the thing that holds it in place, the rest of the vertebrae that came with it. So we'll just try to get it. It might hook itself on this adapter, this coupler here, and that's fine for these purposes, but since this isn't the actual bucky skeleton, you're not going to have the other vertebrae there. Okay, so I tighten that up good and tight. Okay, and now it's all ready to go. That's the last step, is to attach that. And once we'll get a bucky skeleton here, and I'll do a video later on showing exactly how to do this and cut it. It's basically, you'll do it by sight. Once you've removed some of the vertebrae, you can hold this vertebrae up. Let me grab another one. When you get the head off of the bucky skeleton, you can hold this vertebrae up to where the top vertebrae on the bucky is, and that will give you a clue as to how many you have to remove and the height that it needs to be at. You're going to cut the shaft just below where this stands, if you're holding it up to the top vertebrae. So you're going to cut your shaft that runs up the spine right there. You just cut it with a hacksaw, and you'll probably have to remove a few more of the vertebrae, but set them aside and save them so that you can get at that piece. And you cut it off with the hacksaw, and then you're going to set this on with the coupler. This is the coupler that see that. This is the coupler that holds together the shaft that goes up into the skull, and on the other side the shaft that's the top of the bucky. So after you've cut it, and you have this neck piece attached to the skeleton, not to the skull, then you're going to lower that back down, connect that, and let this drop back down. Now after you cut that rod in the bucky, you're going to replace vertebrae back up to the point where this is going to take over. And maybe you might have to do it a couple of times to find out exactly how many you want to take out to make it look right. And if you need to clip something off of the bottom here to make it fit flush, you go ahead. It's just plastic. You can file it down. You can mess with it to make it mesh with whatever is already on the skeleton. And that brings us to the end of the Halloween Skulls 3-axis skull assembly series. This is number 5, and it is the last video in the series.